seekers and saints. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Well, Christmas is over, New Year has already started, and today is the second day of January of 2021, and we raise our hopeful gaze towards 2021 and ask God to help us forget 2020 except for all the good things that He did for us through that year. Let's take out our Bibles and let's get ready to bow our hearts in honor to our God in prayer. Father, I just come to you right now in your Son Jesus' name. I include you, Jesus, as well as the Holy Spirit, for a threefold cord is not easily broken. And I ask that you bind us together, Father, in your perfect will on earth as it is in heaven, in this coming year, that we see your purposes in the earth for all that's going on, that we will see that you are allowing a lot of things so that the church will be more prayerful, that there will be unity in our mind in Christ, that we want to evangelize and bring as many people and souls into your kingdom before the clock strikes midnight and the thief appears and takes his church out, and then sets the tone for tribulation, where the Antichrist will come in horror. We ask that no one that we love or know meet that hour. Lord, I ask that you bless this Bible study, these scriptures, Father, that you anoint your word, Lord, that you give us insight, spiritual ears and eyes to see everything that's going on, especially in Daniel 5, starting with verse 5. We give you all the glory and honor in Jesus' blessed name, our Redeemer. Amen. Okay, so we left off at verse 4, which Daniel 5, verse 4, which I will reread. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold, of silver, of brass, of iron, of wood, and stone. Daniel 5:4. And I said at the end of the last video, we will see what is going to happen. Suddenly there's fingers of God writing upon the wall. In the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand, and he wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. Daniel 5:5. God now directly intervenes. He does not speak by dream or vision, because this is a man whom he doesn't intend to reach. Wow, that's got to be really bad. God would not endure this impious insult to heaven, so he writes on the wall of the banqueting hall. Is it done in anger? Very frankly, we think it is, and we believe the one who wrote this is the same one who wrote in the sand when they brought a sinful woman before him in John chapter 8, verses 1 through 11. At that time, it was a message of forgiveness. Here, for Belshazzar, it is a message of doom. He has ignored the God of heaven, as Daniel will soon make clear to him. I'm going to go over to David Cusick. He makes mention of this as well. I hope you all had a wonderful, wonderful Christmas and New Year's. So we're looking at verse 5 here. Easier said than done. Okay. He mentions that God can and sometimes and does communicate to man in unexpected and even shocking ways. Here a hand mysteriously appeared and wrote on a wall. This, of course, is where we get the proverbial phrase, the writing is on the wall. Belshazzar's reaction to the message and his call for someone to interpret the message. Then the king's countenance changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his hips were loosened and his knees knocked against each other. Let me bring something in here. in one of the writers and teachers, he tells a story of a general, and it is a specific one that I don't remember at the time, but as he was a ship captain, and as they were being attacked at different times, he would ask his servant to bring him his red vest. And this happened a couple, 3 times, and the servant asked this general, he said, how come you always, when we're ready to go, someone's attacking us, you always ask for your red vest? And he says it's because if a bullet should hit me or an arrow, that it would not upset the crew because the blood wouldn't be able to be seen through his red vest. And then a time came when they were being attacked by someone most ferocious at the bow of the ship, and the servant runs down and tells the general, and the general says, bring me my brown breeches. I think we all get the picture. And this is what's going on with the king. It so troubled him that the joints of his hips were loosened and his knees knocked against each other. And let me see if it's the same over here. Loins. The joints of his loins were loosened and his knees smote one against another in Daniel 5:6. I wonder why the translation's a little bit different here. He says the joints of his hips, but I like the translation better, that his joints of his loins were loosened and loosed, and his knees smote one against another. Belshazzar couldn't stand up. A few moments ago he'd been too drunk to stand up. Although he's suddenly sober, he still can't stand up. What he has seen on the wall has scared him nearly to death. He is overwhelmed with fear. The king cried aloud to bring in the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. And the king spoke and said to the wise men of Babylon, whosoever shall read this writing and show me the interpretation thereof shall be clothed with scarlet and have a chain of gold about his neck, and shall be the 3rd ruler in the kingdom. Daniel 5:7. Notice that the reward was to be the 3rd ruler in the kingdom. How accurate Daniel is. The man who wrote this book had to have been there and understood the circumstances. Nabonidus was the real king, and Belshazzar was the only second in the kingdom. Nabonidus didn't have was never on good terms with anyone in the Babylonian kingdom. He didn't like to be there, and the people that lived there didn't like him to be there. So he was off somewhere, and he had gone ahead and let Belshazzar, his son, go ahead and rule in his place. So we have failure of the wise men to read the handwriting. Then came in all the king's wise men, but they could not read the writing nor make known to the king the interpretation thereof in Daniel 5:8. Well, of course not. They couldn't do it the first time when there was writing. When Nebuchadnezzar had to have Daniel come in and interpret his dream, how could these people that were ungodly understand a writing that God was putting up? That would be like someone who has a prayer language having someone, or they would have someone come in that was not born again, trying to interpret the tongues that one is speaking, or even a prophecy in tongues where it would be another language. This is a language right now that cannot be understood but by someone who has the Spirit of God in them. So when Belshazzar finally got his senses back, he had the wise men trotted in and asked them to give the interpretation of the writing on the wall. Although he offered them a handsome reward, they could only stand there looking at him. They didn't know the answer, and they didn't know what to do. This is the 3rd time the wise men of Babylon have failed. On the 3rd strike, you're out, you know. Think maybe this incident put them out of business. Then was King Belshazzar greatly troubled, and his countenance was changed in him, and his lords were astonished. Daniel 5:9. I want to tell you something. I came in here, I have been praying and doing my daily devotions, and just feeling wiped out today. I did some things that I needed to do, and I said, Lord, I really need to give something today. I need to give the reading of Scripture today. I am so really exhausted, but I just noticed that as I'm doing what it is that I believe the Lord would have me do, at least to read the Scriptures in video broadcasting, I can feel myself suddenly coming back to life. There's a new energy that's surging through me. And I have this new, let's see if I have it here. I have this devotional book that I've never used from the beginning. I've had it for years. And so I resolved this year to completely read it exactly the way it is, starting in Genesis, and it is 365 daily readings with devotions. You go through the whole Bible in 1 year by going through this. And I found this at a little library over in Hoquiam, Washington. So I'm going to do this, and I believe that I am going to be better for it, and I am more prayed up when I come in. So I'm trying to figure out why I'm getting, suddenly, I'm getting that book, for some reason, was cutting light out, and I don't know why. So if I do this, or I do this, or I do this, my daughter mentioned yesterday, she said, what type of a filter are you using? I'm not using a filter at all. I'm using a little webcam sitting on my desk, and it is what I have. And actually, I don't know if I can get anything better. I do have this little GoPro that suddenly I have in my hands, and so I'm going to fiddle with it. I have a wonderful new recording device, microphone. I have this microphone here, which am I using this right now? I guess I am. So we're going to, so we need to see if it is recording my voice as loud as I need it to be recorded. But anyway, let's go on. So then was King Belshazzar greatly troubled, and his countenance was changed in him, and his lords were astonished. Daniel 5:9. You can imagine the change which took place in that banquet room. A few moments before they had been laughing and drunk. Now they are sober and perplexed and troubled. Now the queen, by reason of the words of the king and his lords, came into the banquet house. And the queen spake out and said, O king, live forever. Let not thy thoughts trouble thee, nor let thy countenance be changed. Daniel 5:10. Now our presumption is, and we knew the dates. Let's see if I can find my calendar here, which I should be able to find. Yep, here we go. So we know that Nebuchadnezzar was died in 562 BC. So Belshazzar is in 551. So we do presume, and that was the third year of Belshazzar, obviously his end, his last year. And so we also know Belshazzar was the presumed son of Nabonidus, which he began his reign as regent king in the first year of Belshazzar was 553, to 551. So he wasn't on the throne very long before God really got aggravated and tired of this nonsense. But we presume that the queen then was Nebuchadnezzar's wife. And we also feel that Nebuchadnezzar actually taught the queen because of the circumstances of Nebuchadnezzar accepting the Lord. And as Chuck Missler says, and I agree with him, that we will see Nebuchadnezzar in heaven. He did accept the Lord. He did repent. He was changed. And probably was the reason why God spoke to him in dreams and did not speak to Belshazzar in dreams. But anyway, the queen comes running in, and of course she's always telling, these people are always telling the king to live forever. And the queen spake and said, O king, live forever, let not thy thoughts trouble thee, nor let thy countenance be changed. And that was in Daniel 5:10. The queen here is the queen mother, the wife of Nebuchadnezzar. She heard what had happened at the banquet, and she came in to speak to the king. So as much as they believe it is, we believe it also, the queen is also the wife of Nebuchadnezzar. There is a man in the kingdom in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. And in the days of thy father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, was found in him, whom the king Nebuchadnezzar, thy father, the king, thy father, made master of the magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, and soothsayers, Daniel 5:11. Nebuchadnezzar, thy father, relationships are indicated with one word. Therefore, father could refer to a father, a grandfather, a great-grandfather, or even a great-great-grandfather. But it was his grandfather, Belshazzar's grandfather. So, for as much as an excellent spirit and knowledge and understanding, interpreting of dreams and showing of hard sentences and dissolving of doubts were found in the same Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar. We know that Belteshazzar was the name of one of the gods that Nebuchadnezzar was serving, and they named Daniel after one of those false gods. Now, but he always addressed Daniel by his Hebrew name. He did not address him by Belteshazzar, because there was a relationship that had been built up between these two. Now let Daniel be called, and she's even calling him Daniel. He is even, and she's saying the king named him, but he did not call him Belteshazzar. He called him Daniel. And he will show your interpretation, Daniel 5, verse 12. Now, the queen mother had to have been around during this time that Nebuchadnezzar had been out in the fields. We don't know if he was out in the fields. He may have been eating. He was out of his mind. He couldn't know anything. He couldn't discern anything. He had become as a wild beast. But the queen mother, his wife, had to have been around during that time. And at that point, she had to have, for her to be talking this way about Daniel, she had to have also listened to Daniel's teaching and also had a relationship with him. The queen mother has come to help her grandson out of his predicament. She tells him there is a man in his kingdom by the name of Daniel, a spirit-filled man who can decipher the writing. And Daniel spurns the king's gifts. Well, third in command. How can that even be cool? If Nabonidus came back, he probably wouldn't agree well, he might agree, but you can't promise something you can't give if you don't have it to give. Daniel spurns the king's gift. Then Daniel was brought in before the king, and the king spake and said unto Daniel, Art thou that Daniel which art of the children of the captivity of Judah, whom the king my father brought out of Jewry? I have even heard of thee, that the spirit of the gods is in thee, and that light and understanding and excellent wisdom is found in thee. Daniel 5, verses 13 through 14. Daniel's vivid description shows us that Belshazzar was terrified. the writing on the wall he could neither read nor understand, and which now being held to the fire of God's wrath became legible. Through Daniel, he's going to read it. For the king, the difficulty was not to give the dictionary definition of the terms, but to see what significance they had for him. Archaeologists have discovered why Belshazzar offered the interpreter of the dream the third place in the kingdom. And as we've already said, the real king was Nabonidus, and his son Belshazzar ruled as second in the kingdom. Belshazzar couldn't give away the second place in the kingdom. Actually, he couldn't give away the third place in the kingdom because he wasn't going to be around that long. Because he was the second in the kingdom at the time. The best he had to offer was the third place, if he could even do that. When Daniel came to interpret the words on the wall, it does not seem so hard to figure out. It may be that God deliberately put a veil over the minds of these men so Daniel could be called. Others, such as Adam Clark, suppose that the Babylonian wise men could not read the writing because it was in Hebrew. Aha! Now we have a clue. Okay. And the queen referred to Daniel by his Jewish name, thus showing respect for his faith and background. You have to remember that everything that is written in this book is Aramaic, not Hebrew. Jesus spoke in Aramaic. I want to check something. Okay, what I was trying to look at was, I believe that there was some type of a language adjustment. So I want to give a little history here of what I have found out that I suspected. Now, there was the Babylonian captivity. So we know that Daniel is written in Aramaic. And so from the Babylonian captivity to the Bar Kokhba revolt, after the time of King David, the nation of Israel was split into two kingdoms, Israel in the north and Judah in the south. The northern kingdom of Israel was taken into captivity by the Assyrians around 740 BC, which is 740 BC. And the southern kingdom of Judah was taken into Babylonian captivity about 570 BC. Well, that's not exactly what I have on my list here. But let's go with it. During their captivity in Babylon, the Hebrews continued to speak the Hebrew language, but instead of writing the language with the Hebrew script, often referred to as Paleo-Hebrew, they adopted the Aramaic square script to write the Hebrew language, and the Hebrew script was used on a very limited basis, such as a few biblical scrolls and coins. When the Hebrews returned to the land of Israel around 500 BC, okay. I have 515 BC here. But it was believed that the Hebrews had abandoned the Hebrew language and instead spoke the Aramaic language, the language of their captors in Babylon. The Oxford Dictionary of the Christian Church in its first edition in 1958 stated, Hebrew ceased to be a spoken language around the 4th century BC. However, much textual and archaeological evidence has been discovered over recent years which has revised this long-established theory. And one of the most compelling evidences for the continued use of Hebrew into the 2nd century AD is a letter from the Jewish general Simon Bar Kokhba, or Shimon ben Kozva, as the first line of the letter states in the above picture, which is dated at 135 AD, which he wrote during the Second Jewish Revolt against Rome. This letter, along many along with many others, was written in Hebrew, establishing the fact that Hebrew was still the language of the Jewish people even into the 2nd century A.D. Because of the overwhelming evidence of Hebrew's continued use, the Oxford Dictionary of the Christian Church in its 3rd edition in 1997 now states, Hebrew continued to be used as a spoken and written language in the New Testament period. So, we do know, though, that Daniel was written in Aramaic, and I'm going to go ahead and cut this picture of this Bar Kokhba letter from 135 AD, and I will put it on this site so that you all can see it. There we go. Bar Kokhba letter. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and put that on this editor right now at this minute so that I will know exactly where it goes. And I'm so grateful for this editor that God has shown me that is an easier type of editing tool than trying to use. Let's see, do we have it? There it is. And I will bring it right on in here, and I will put it right here. There we go. So I will know right where it is. And I appreciate you bearing with me. I'm going to save this. Daniel 5, verses 4 through, let's call it 28 today. Okay, so that's going to go ahead and save all of that. There we go. Now we're going to go back to our scriptures. And so Daniel spurns the king's gifts. So we already know that Belshazzar is in the mood to give out the third of his kingdom for anyone who can read the writing on the wall, and the Chaldeans nor his magicians or anyone else can read this writing. And now we're looking at this writing now supposedly that it was Hebrew. Daniel is now brought in. He evidently has been set aside and pushed out of the office after the death of Nebuchadnezzar. And now the wise men, the astrologers, have been brought in before me that they should read this writing and make known unto me the interpretation thereof, but they could not show the interpretation to the king. And I have heard of thee that thou canst make interpretations and dissolve doubts. Now that thou, if thou canst read the writing and make known to me the interpretation thereof, thou shalt be clothed with scarlet and have a chain of gold about thy neck, and shalt be the third ruler of the kingdom. Daniel 5:15 through 16. Belshazzar is buttering Daniel up and tells him if he can give the interpretation which the wise men have failed to give, then he will make him the third ruler of the kingdom. Thus Daniel is offered the same reward which has been afforded to the wise men. So he doesn't care who he gives it to, just so he can get this writing read. Then Daniel answered and said before the king, Let thy gifts be to thyself, and give thy rewards to another. Yet I will read the writing unto the king, and make known unto him the interpretation. Daniel 5:17. In other words, he spurns him. It's like, look, I don't want the third part of your kingdom. So he's absolutely contemptuous of Belshazzar. I'm sure that if the king had not been so filled with fear, he would not have ignored Daniel's insult. After all, why did Daniel need this reward? He would not have had it but for a few hours. because it wasn't Belshazzar's to give. And let me go over here to since Belshazzar didn't think to call for Daniel himself, it seems that his remembrance of Daniel was either long ago or now, just now by the queen, so because the queen has just now gotten his memory back up to where it should be. This silly and shallow prince hath nothing to say but what was put into his mouth by his wiser grandmother. And so then Daniel describes Belshazzar's sinful pride. Let me go back here a minute. Before Daniel interprets the handwriting on the wall, he gives to this young king who is reigning under his father the best sermon he probably ever could receive. Daniel is not the young man who went into the presence of old King Nebuchadnezzar. He is now an old man going into the presence of a young king. There had been no generation gap with Nebuchadnezzar, and there is not one now. Listen to what Daniel tells Belshazzar. O thou king, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar thy father a kingdom and majesty and glory and honor. And for the majesty that he gave him, all people, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him, whom he would slew, and whom he would be kept, and whom he would keep alive, and whom he set up, and whom he put down. It's in very strange sentences, so we'll bear with it. Daniel 5:18 through 19. Nebuchadnezzar had been an absolute ruler on this earth, and we believe there has not been another ruler like him, and there will not be another until the Antichrist rules. Daniel recites for Belshazzar how God had dealt with his grandfather. God had put him on the throne, and God had given him the world kingdom. Then he tells Belshazzar of the experience Nebuchadnezzar had, that when his heart was lifted up and his mind hardened in pride, he was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. He was driven from the sons of men, and his heart was made like the beasts, and his dwelling was with the wild asses. They fed him with grass like oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till he knew that the Most High God ruled in the kingdom of men, and that he appointeth over it whomever he will. And thou, his son, O Belshazzar, hast not humbled thine heart, though thou knewest all this, but hast lifted up thyself against the Lord of heaven, and they have brought the vessels of his house before thee, and thou and thy lords, thy wives, and thy concubines have drunk wine in them, and thou hast praised the gods of silver and gold, brass, iron, and wood, and stone, which see not, nor hear, nor know, and the God in whom hand thy breath is, and whose are all thy ways, hast thou not glorified. Then was the part of the hand sent from him, and this writing was written in Daniel 5:20 through 24. God thought or wanted Belshazzar to see the same thing that Nebuchadnezzar saw, who he was. But Belshazzar, who even knew of his grandfather's story, as we've seen in the previous verse, he knew and still did not take heed. So Daniel preaches a very pointed and powerful sermon to Belshazzar. God had given the king to Nebuchadnezzar, and he had been an absolute sovereign whom no man could question or hinder, and whose wishes and whims were the law of the realm. However, when Nebuchadnezzar became filled with pride, God humbled him to a tragic episode. When Daniel reminds Belshazzar of Nebuchadnezzar's humiliating experience, you wonder if Daniel is rubbing it in. Perhaps he is. He is reminding this young, upstart, proud king that if he is lifted up by pride, it is either because of his drinking or because he is insane. Belshazzar was a proud and vain man. Although he knew of his grandfather's insanity and of his descent to the level of a beast, he had not profited by this experience. Instead, He had committed a sacrilege in using the vessels taken from God's temple in Jerusalem. He had defied the living with true God, and by the profane use of that which had been holy, he had mocked God and insulted him. Knowing the truth, he yet rejected it. The breath of the creature should praise the Creator, but Belshazzar blasphemed God with his breath. The ways of the creature should glorify the Creator, but Belshazzar used his ways to mock and offend God. Every creature owes something to the Creator. If God held Belshazzar responsible, my friend, for the ray of light which shone across his pathway, what will he say to men living in the blaze of light which illumines the world today? Every unconverted man in this country has more light than Belshazzar had. I wanted to bring out, and I've been hearing this, and I am going to end with this today until I go into the next phase of the interpretation of the writing on the wall. I'm looking for Romans 1. Okay. In Romans 1, there's 32 verses, but in particular, and I've been hearing it all day long as people have been preaching the word, they keep coming to, you are, or these are living in a Roman 1 mindset. And so, unbelief and its consequences. And that's Romans 1:18. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who hold the truth in unrighteousness. Because that which may be known of God is manifest in them, for God hath showed it unto them. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Because that, when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of the uncorruptible God into an image made like to corruptible man, and to birds and four-footed beasts and creeping things. Wherefore God also gave them up to uncleanness through the lusts of their own hearts, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves, who changed the truth of God into a lie, and worshipped and served the creature more than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. For this cause God gave them up into vile affections, for even their women did change the natural use into that which is against nature. And likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman, burned in their lust one toward another. Men with men, working that which is unseemly, and receiving it themselves that recompense their error which was meet. And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a reprobate mind, to do those things which are not convenient, being filled with unrighteousness, fornication, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, debate, deceit, malignity, whisperers, backbiters, haters of God, despiteful, proud boasters, inventors of evil things, disobedient to parents, without understanding, covenant breakers, without natural affection, implacable, unmerciful, who, knowing the judgment of God, that they which commit such things are worthy of death, not only do the same, but have pleasure in them that do them. Okay, let me go back over here. And so we see that Belshazzar has not humbled his heart. So the same mercy that Nebuchadnezzar was given by God in teaching him the lesson, he did not give to Belshazzar. And I believe the main reason is Belshazzar, when he took those vessels out, he was defying God. Nebuchadnezzar was not in defiance. Nebuchadnezzar also seemed to have a malady, which Daniel does address here when he makes the statement, perhaps he is reminding this young proud king that he is lifted up by pride. It is either because of his drinking or because he is insane. His grandfather had a type of insanity. You cannot say, I was insane and I didn't do it, though, when you're defying God. And I believe that is why Belshazzar was treated thus, because he had mocked and insulted God. He knew the truth and he rejected it. The same as those that, I'm going to put a ribbon here, and we'll start this tomorrow. Let me, there we go. We'll start right there. We are living in a day and age, and even John MacArthur brought it out this morning. There's certain things that I don't want to say on my video broadcasts that I could say within a congregation. So if anyone wants to ask me to come speak to a congregation or in a women's meeting, I'll be more than happy to be more candid, because we've got the same rebels that were back in that day. We have them today, and they are companies that would like to take away freedom of speech. But because I have the freedom right now to read the scriptures, and I think the Lord actually did admonish me, quit giving my piece of my mind, but to look at it from God's point of view. But our people, this day and age, more and more, are being given over to the lusts of the flesh and a reprobate mind. And you all do know what I am talking about. It isn't just perversion. It is parents who are allowing their children to dictate to them who they want to be, not who or what God made them. And that is a problem. And we could go into all kinds of discussions about parental responsibility and how God is going to look at that parent who, how they are raising their children and what they will allow and what they will not allow. But the further away that you get from God's word, the further away you will get from truth, even if you'd ever been. But as mentioned in Genesis this morning while I was reading, because I asked the Lord, I said, I'm reading Genesis 3. Started out with 1 yesterday for the first of the year, and then I'm in 3 and 4 for today. What was it? And that you would bring it up. And he's bringing it up into my spirit right now. It's the conscience. It's the conscience. Now, I don't know if Adam and Eve didn't need a conscience while they were in the garden to know what was right and wrong. But once they ate of the tree of the forbidden fruit, they suddenly knew right from wrong. And it's very possible that that fruit, that a conscience was needed from that point on to tell them right from wrong. Because in the garden, it wouldn't have made any difference. Was that you would know things. And so we have to have a conscience. So evidently we're all born, well, is a conscience developed? You might ask. You've got a little baby, and he will lie with the first breath coming out of his mouth. Did you eat the cookie? No. They will lie. We are born to lie. So a conscience also, it seems to me, must be instilled in us by our parents teaching us right from wrong. And so they also take part in that as well. Well, evidently, Nabonidus raised Belshazzar, or it was his son, and Nabonidus, what was going on with him? He didn't want to rule. They didn't like him in Babylon, therefore he left. So obviously, he wasn't a very nice person, and he raised his son to not be a very nice person, and to be full of pride, and he didn't drop from Nebuchadnezzar's tree, he dropped from Nabonidus' tree. And so we want to look at our children, and we want to say, what do we want them to be like? How much are we willing to teach them the truth? Or are we just going to go ahead and just let them grow up without any conscience, no knowledge, no nothing, and let them decide for themselves what they're going to be? I say no. No, you show them the right path. Now, they may leave that path, but you might be assured that if you teach them in a godly way and you teach them God's word, that they will eventually come back to the knowledge and truth of Jesus Christ. If they don't, it is a defiant nature, and they will also suffer the same calamity as Belshazzar, because that vainness and that pride, it does us no good for us to say to someone who's sinning, oh, that's all right, honey. That's all right. You just go ahead. We love you. That's just fine. No, because what you're doing is you are propelling that person into hell. And it is our responsibility to tell someone the truth, and that's the bottom line about that. We tell them the truth in love, and that is what we should be doing. So I'm going to go ahead and pray us in, or out. I've got a heater here that's playing tricks. Anyway, Father, we lift you up and we give you all the glory. We thank you for this new year. Lord, we ask that we started out really well by reading your word, doing a devotional, talking to you, having relationship with you, having relationship with the body of Christ, and using our talents that you've given us, and use them for your kingdom, Father, in Jesus' name. And if there's anyone out there that does not have a Bible, or does not know the Lord, or would like to have a relationship with Christ, you can either say a sinner's prayer with me, or you can call me. I'm Pam Gunderson. I'm the host of In Him Ministries Bible Study and Christian News. You can call me at 833-726-8255, or if it's easier, 833-PAM-TALKS. You can email me at pam@uinhimministries.com or pam@uinhim.info, or you can write me at 1018 East Wishkaw Street, Suite 213 in Aberdeen, Washington, 98520. Let's go ahead and go in prayer. Father, I lift you up right now, and if you wish to pray this with me, you may, and with a sincere heart, but not just as an exercise. Father, I thank you for sending your son Jesus to save me. I believe that Jesus died for me, and he covered my sins with the blood that he shed on the cross. I believe that he is sitting at the right-hand side of God, ever intermediating for we who are in him. I believe that he is coming back one day and taking his church out I believe that he is coming to set his kingdom up in Jerusalem, and that there'll be a millennium of 1,000 years where he will rule and reign. I believe that my sins are forgiven, and they are as far from the east as from the west, and that I call Jesus my Lord, and that I will follow you, Jesus, for the rest of my days. I'm asking you to come into my heart, and that I receive you as Lord. I give you my heart. Holy Spirit, I'm asking you to join in this prayer with us right now. Your presence to come in and fill us. Lord, that you would fill us. Give us a new filling for 2021. And these ones that have prayed with you, that want to trust you as Savior, you will fill them now, that you will breathe on them by your Holy Spirit. Even the baptism of the Holy Spirit, Jesus. That you would give us that hope of glory, that blessed hope. We give you all the glory, Lord God. And if you've prayed that prayer, that if you want a Bible, please ask for one. You'll see the address, and I will have to have your address so that I know where to send it. Anyway, I will be back tomorrow, hopefully, on the 3rd of January, and we'll begin with what was written on that wall. What was it that frightened King Belshazzar so badly, and what is going to happen?